Very welcome to Capricorn TV.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's great to be here. I'm in partnership with Disclosed TV today. I have to give these guys a mention.
Yeah, okay.
And we're here to talk about physics, I guess, a little bit, but always a bit about the biography, Nassim. Tell me a little about you that we don't read in the biography, I guess. Maybe something about moving from Geneva to Canada. Did that have a big change in your life in terms of maybe an adverse effect? Maybe that's a negative thing, people upping their whole life.
Right.
Or maybe that was an opportunity for you to see the world in a different way.
Well, I was 3 years old.
See.
So I don't know. I don't remember so much what it did to my life, but I know that it did a lot to my family's life.
Yeah.
You know, my mom and my father were young and excited to move into a new country, but at the same time, you know, the cold of Canada was kind of shocking for my mother. So we used to go back to Switzerland in the summers and Italy to be with my family, and that I really enjoyed every year. But it was great to be in Canada as well because you know, it was the land of opportunities. It was the Americas, and you know, it was there was more openness, and I think that allowed me to actually flourish in my younger years better, you know, and have a opportunity to be more open. Yeah.
When was the first attraction for physics? I'm always interested in physicists or people who are even engineers for that matter. What was the first moment? Because for me, my father taught me ham radio. I was building radio transmitters as a kid, and I loved it. And I just seen the new world. You could create things and make things. And so maybe just what was the first moment?
Bounce signals of the ionosphere and all this stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, you know, this was the same for me in some ways that my father was an intellectual. He was a professor at the university in child psychology, and I was very interested in in the human mind and consciousness, but I was as well, I think from the beginning, from as far as I can remember, really intrigued with reality. It wasn't obvious to me that this should exist and that we should be in this world experiencing it. To me, this was a great mystery, and you know, I was very inquisitive from very young. I wanted to know how nature worked, and you know, how does a flower knows, you know, to do its thing? How does my cell know to do their thing? And, you know, what is this conscious experience I'm having every day? And every time I looked around, and when I looked in nature, what I saw was patterns. When I looked in nature, when I looked in social behaviors, when I looked everywhere, for me, what I saw was patterns. And to me, patterns, geometry, the structure that made everything possible must have had some foundation at the very base of physics. And when I started to study physics and scientific knowledge, I couldn't find that. It wasn't clear, you know, in what was being thought. And then I studied ancient civilization as well, and anthropology and archaeology and all this. And I found that many civilizations around the world had the concept like that, you know, and so, you know, I started to put the two together.
I'm glad you mentioned that. With respect to ancient Egypt, I always say that these guys did so much in engineering. I just don't think they did it as engineers. They couldn't have done that level of, I mean, I'm talking the very ancient stuff. I know it fell apart around Akhenaten, but, you know, with the really ancient stuff, these guys had a philosophy. They looked at nature just like you described. They looked at everything as a philosophical polymath concept. And engineering was one offshoot of that.
That's right. Yeah, it was actually very, you know, very holistic in their approach. You know, students would study from astronomy to, you know, consciousness study and all this, and health and all this. And, you know, in the Vedic tradition, it could take 20 years for a student to you know, go through all their classes and graduate. So it was very much holistic in their approach, and certainly engineering was only one aspect of it. And some of the engineering feats that you find around the world from these ancient civilizations are not reproducible today with all of our technologies. So there's definitely a great mystery there.
Yeah. I think that's the one thing I came through engineering, and I think that's the one thing that makes me boggle the most. And I just know that I look at things as an engineer, and we have the wrong operating system to understand this. I think that's what we need, is a new operating system.
Right.
And that kind of leads us back into physics, because physics has its own operating system that you described, and geometry is the base of that.
Right, absolutely. And you know, there's lots of evidence that this knowledge that was present at the time came from somewhere else, because all these ancient civilizations generally don't claim that they came up with all this stuff. They claim they were taught all this stuff from people from the stars. But the physics that you find in these ancient civilizations, the way they viewed the physical structure of the universe, and the physics we're arriving to in very modern, very fine-edged physics are very similar.
Wow.
You know, it all reverts back to this fundamental field of energy, this fundamental field that structures all of creation into this organized system that eventually produced biology and even, you know, a conscious being like you and me. You know, and that is not anything that's predicted in the standard model of physics today. It hasn't been there ever. And quantum theory predicts the universe should be completely random and there should be no, you know, organizing principle. And so does relativistic physics. So there's a new set of physics now that's really bubbling. It used to be really detrimental for a physicist to even mention the word consciousness, or, you know, and but now it's getting much more acceptable and popular to actually study what is the basis of consciousness and self-organizing systems, because biology, you know, does emerge from the physical nature of the universe as we observe it on our planet, and we have to be able to account for that.
I think when we had the Solvay conference and everybody got together for the quantum physics bash, and they all wanted to philosophize and understand what quantum physics was, it's now some nearly 100 years, well, 90 years since that date. Do you think it's time again we all sat down and, you know, put our heads together in a consortium?
Yeah.
Because 90 years is a long time to be kind of stuck in this mode.
Right, and some of the conclusions of the and interpretation of some of the experiments, especially the double slit experiment and the Copenhagen interpretation, I believe, and more physicists are coming to that conclusion, really need an upgrade. You know, this idea that the quantum world is some kind of magical world where everything can happen and it's all bizarre, and don't try to visualize it, just write the math, it's all statistics and forget about it, it's got no structure and all this. I think that is starting to finally go away. Pilot wave theory is able to explain, as I predicted for some 25 years, that fluid dynamics can explain the double slit experiment without the whole quantum weirdness required. It actually, you know, if you put little beads of silicone on a silicone bath and you oscillate it and you shoot the beads at the slits, you get all the same result as the double slit experiment. You know, and you see, the thing is that the double slit experiment and the Copenhagen interpretation has been kind of like taken in by the spiritual world and the philosopher as evidence for consciousness, when actually the formalism of the mathematics doesn't say absolutely anything about consciousness. It just says that a measurement creates a collapse in the waveform, but the collapse is completely random. It doesn't predict any organized system, you know, so it does not predict consciousness. And the pilot wave theory that is now starting to become more and more popular to explain the double slit experiment, which, you know, by the way, the Bouglier in, you know, Copenhagen tried to talked to Einstein and Bohr and Planck about, because he had figured out that you could actually explain, because if you have a particle moving in a field, it makes waves. So you have a particle and a wave, but it's not some weird thing that you can't explain. But as well, it says that if you have something, because we're in a field, it's not empty space between you and I. There's this field of information. Whatever is in the field makes waves. So of course, if you have an instrument that measures the experiment or something, that is making waves, and it changes the experiment. Like if you observe the experiment, if you're there in the room and you observe the experiment, you make wave and you interfere with the waves that the particle is making, and you're getting a different result. So it's not that consciousness is what's making, but it's that everything is influencing everything, because we're part of a unified field of information that makes up our reality, and the equations I wrote actually demonstrate that.
I want you to talk a little bit about the scaling law, because when I've seen the scaling law, and it's a beautiful thing. When you see it and you get it, you just get it. So tell us a little bit, maybe I'll put in a graphic, but maybe just give us a little quick synopsis on the scaling law.
Well, so the scaling law demonstrate that, you go from universal size, like the size of our universe, all the way to the Planck length. And you plot in there, the energy level and radiuses of objects in between, like quasars and galactic centers and stellar objects and atomic structures, and then all the way to the Planck length, which is billions of times smaller than an atom. And they all line up on this linear progression, which you wouldn't expect if the universe was completely random and was doing, it shows that there's organization and that there's relationship between all the scales.
By the way, that's for the audience, that's the basis of all the physics experiments that we're looking for. We're looking for the linear graph.
Right.
And once you get that in all physics experiments, you're on a home run.
Yeah, you found something. And these scales are huge. Like the Planck length is billions of times smaller than a proton, right? Which the proton is already really small. You're made out of 100 trillion cell. Each cell is made out of 100 trillion atom. So a little proton is really teeny, right? Well, billions of times smaller than that is the Planck. And then the universe is huge, right? The billions of galaxies, superclusters and everything are in the universe. And for a linear graph to come out just right with all the objects in between. And the interesting thing is that biology, or humans, or whatever, this scale fits almost perfectly in the middle between the Planck and the universal size. And so that tells you something really profound about the way we came about, and kind of like biology or our existence may be kind of the link between the big and the small. And using that graph, I eventually came to, because when you plot all these things, actually our universe obeys the condition of a black hole, and then quasars are black holes, galactic centers are black holes, and then atoms, and then subatomic particle like the Planck is a black hole. It starts to tell you something about what atoms are. And so from there, I start to write physics describing the nuclei of an atom as a mini black hole. And that got me in a lot of trouble.
I guess, and that leads into, I guess you have a different way of looking at the world, but why has physics ignored the geometry? Or why has nobody else just come up with the geometry? I know you look at the world in a different way, and that's what we need.
Right.
Bright minds to look at the world in different perspectives. And that's true for anything. But why has everybody just ignored the geometry?
Well, this was a question Einstein had, because Einstein literally geometrized space-time. So he brought the geometry back in at the level of space and time. But that's exactly what happened during that region of time in the so-called Copenhagen interpretation, is that all mechanical and geometric structures were abandoned. because the quantum world seemed so strange. They just reverted to only conceptual math with no physical model. And they basically said, don't try to visualize any structure in a geometric. It's only probability function, and we are not gonna have any, this famous saying from Feynman, for instance, to his students, saying, shut up and calculate, meaning like don't try to like visualize it. It's just probabilities on a probability curve, and it's not anything and so there was vile opposition to any concept of any geometric or fundamental structure at the quantum level. And Einstein died trying to find a solution. He never went with it's all probabilities. I mean, his famous saying, "God doesn't play dice with the world," was exactly that. He didn't believe that the world was just some kind of random fluctuation of probabilities, that there was some structure below it that we didn't understand just because the complexity was too high, and that he spent, literally to the end of his life trying to find it. Like the day he died, he was still writing physics trying to find it. So but he was missing a few pieces of information, which if he would have had, probably you would have solved. And some of the pieces of information it was missing was observation of black holes and galactic and stellar structure that informs you about the way the universe does things.
I think that's the beautiful thing, is that the astronomy and the big telescopes that we've built is caught up with the existing body of knowledge from Bohr's and Einstein's work, because they kind of left us a legacy, but the legacy couldn't be finished off until we caught up a bit.
Right, exactly, with observation and as well with some new tools of mathematics like holographic structures, fractal mathematics, and so on that were not available at the time.
Sure. I want to take a little moment to mention the Resonance Project. Where is it at today? How's things going there?
Oh, great. We published a comprehensive course a few months ago that's already, I think, 70 countries around the world have participated in. Thousands of students have been put through, and it's a 6-module course called the Delegate Program. It has all the information in it. It's a great course. Everybody that's taken it are just blown away, and it's changing their lives. And people from like 10 years old, like my sons, and we have people in their 80s, 90s taking the course, and everybody enjoys it. It's made for the layman, and you can go as deep as you want in the information because all the references are there, or you can stay light and just skip off the surface. But it's a great course to take. It gives you all the data, and it really kind of like makes you think about what is life and what is your role in it.
Sure. Oh, wonderful. And I remember growing up, and as a kid, physics and history was taboo. You said you liked that. You were, everybody was in sports and everything.
Yeah.
That was popular. So everybody's into physics and history these days. I think it's a beautiful thing.
Right. Finally, the nerd, or yeah, the geeks are getting popular. But I think that's because people are getting more and more of a sense that we have to find solutions. Not only just for our own satisfaction of understanding what we are and how we got here, but as well because people sense that we have to make dramatic changes in our world as soon as possible, because the way we're going, we're not going to make it.
It's not looking good.
No, it's not looking good. And, if you look at the news, especially this week, you get a sense, that the world is starting to get it, that, we have to make specific, very dramatic step in our society to make it so it's sustainable. And part of making it sustainable is to actually understand the physics of the world at a deeper level so that we can develop technologies that can make a huge difference in the way we do things. For instance, the control of gravity is the next step for humanity. We learned to control electromagnetic fields, and it gave us all of our modern civilization. Now, the next step is to learn to control gravity, which will allow us to become, sustainable, to birth our civilization into a space civilization, to have access to almost infinite amount of materials and liberate humanity.
Sure.
Yeah.
Nassim, we are in Paris today, and you have a big conference tonight.
Yes.
I know you've got a bit of an announcement. I don't know how much you can say. This won't be going out till next week, but if you want to just give us a little mention about what's coming up tonight, whatever you can say.
Yes, I appreciate. What's really exciting for me is that a few weeks ago, Dr. Amira Valbaker, astrophysicist, and I have found, I extended the solution I give to the proton. So I was able to find a very fundamental holographic geometric solution for the proton that give the exact mass and radius of the proton very precisely. I predicted what the radius of the proton should be very precisely in that paper. It was measured a few months later in an accelerator in Switzerland, independent of me. I didn't even know they were doing that. And then it was published. The results were published. The radius was published more precisely than ever before. The mainstream theory were off by 4%, which is a big problem for standard models. But my prediction was extremely accurate. Actually, my prediction was inside the margin of error of the experiment.
Wow.
And so, my prediction was within 0.00036 of the measured value. And so, that was in 2013, and now we finally were able to extend the solution to the electron cloud and the Bohr model of the atom. So now the hydrogen atom and all the other atoms in the table of elements, we can predict the electron cloud, their energy, and where charge come from, which is something that the standard model has not been able to do for almost 150 years of physics. So it's very exciting. The solution is 99.99997%, and so it's very, very exciting.
Wow. Nassim, we could talk physics all day long, but I know I've only got you for a short period of time. Just take a moment to give us out the website where people can follow along and get interested in physics. Okay,
yeah, our website is resonance.is. Resonance is, right? IS, right? And you can go there and go to the academy and take our course. You can find published articles there, you can find my scientific papers there, and every activity that the foundation does is available there.
Yeah. Nassim, tell us a little bit about the Connected Universe.
So the Connected Universe is a movie that has been in the making for the last 3 years by an incredible filmmaker, Malcolm Carter, that has done many movies for NASA and so on. And it's a beautiful movie about some of the work I've been doing, and that's set in nature everywhere, and that talks about the solution I found and what it means and how it applies to nature and what it can do for our civilization in the near future.
Wow. And where can people get the Connected Universe?
People can type in Connected Universe on a YouTube channel and they will see the trailers. And there is Indiegogo campaign, which was the most successful documentary campaign ever on Indiegogo that they can go to, which has all the information about the movie.
Wonderful, Nassim. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.